So I would love to share with you our solutions. This group of Collaboration Global members have stepped forward to say that they have some ideas around how to support each of our mental health. We have to take the bits that we find useful. I would have looked back at my life and gone, I've not really had any mental health problems. But you know what? Thinking about it, oh, there were some times when it was a little bit tough. So I just want to explain now something that happened to me a few years ago and how it's still affecting me today. In 2007, in January, somebody died. And in February, somebody died. And in March, and in April, and in May, and in June, and in July. By August, I was saying, please, somebody tell me you're pregnant. I need some good news. They were nearest and dearest, including my dad, including my husband's brother, people that we were shocked that shouldn't have gone and went too soon. At that point in my life, wasn't aware that I was conditioned to cope. I was there to support other people. This is what I'd been told was, my life. That's hereditary from my nan to my mum to me. What are you crying for? That's not going to be useful. That was how I'd grown up. So I was there over that 8-month period of horrific things that were happening, coping, looking after my husband, looking after my mother, all the things, all the right reasons, doing the right thing. And it was okay because I was strong enough and I coped, and starting a new business and having young children and moving house. And anyway, fast forward to 2013, and my mum dies. And all of that compounded bereavement and grief that I had held on to collapsed on top of me. And I wasn't coping very well. And what I'd done is I'd shut down my emotions so much that I'd also shut down my joy and my happiness. And cue the menopause at around about the same time, I was going crazy inside. I started having panic attacks. I started realizing that I wasn't in control anymore. And I didn't know what to do about it. And I was quite often on the brink, but not telling anybody because you can't do that. You're supposed to be in control. That was my upbringing. And eventually I met a lady who was a stranger, who was very kind and very gentle. And she happened to be a homeopath. And she said, why don't you pop in? So I popped in and she listened. She listened and she listened, and the tears came, and she listened some more. And she gave me a little pot of pills, my magic pills, my homeopathic remedy that was going to help me cling on until I needed to come out of my shadow. And I clung on to those. They were my lifesaver, but it was her listening that did it. These were my white feather that Dumbo had. These were the thing that kept me going. And from there, I took the first step forward to getting out of the darkness. I took that first step into meditation. I took that first step into being with nature. I took that first step into realizing that the ocean had energy that it could find for me. And I took that. And even now, I have to make sure 2-3 times a year, I get to the ocean and I breathe it in and I take it all in, and it keeps it there for me. It gives me that inner strength that I had lost and I didn't have before. And that's what caused my panic. And I still get panic attacks. And I still find that I don't like the dark. And that's what will bring it on. And if people say, as you meditate, breathe in and breathe out, I'm like, no, don't talk to me about breathing, because that's when I can't breathe and it comes again. So we are never free totally of being messed with our mind, but we can learn how to cope. And these amazing people I have around me today are hopefully going to share some of their solutions when they have either experienced it with their friends or their family, or have been part of it themselves. So top left-hand corner for me is Jane. Jane, would you like to share some of your stories of how you've climbed out of the abyss or been on the edge of it and maybe stopped yourself from falling in?
Oh, well, thank you. I'm honored to be here and especially supporting the World Mental Health Summit here in Austria. I'm in Canada right now and I'm just on the outside looking in. And that was one of my coping strategies. I went through 365 days in 2017 to 2018 of just utter chaos, left curveballs out of left field. I had a devastating head injury, a TBI that left me almost speechless. I had a partner with a catastrophic head injury who woke up in a hospital and said, I can't remember who anyone is here, but you're the nicest and the prettiest. Couldn't remember who he was or who I was or meeting me. And the devastating loss of a friend within suddenly and tragically within 3 weeks. That's a lot to cope with. We all have stuff. We all have that stuff, with four letters starting with an S and a T that sometimes just hits us and we don't know where to go. And my saving grace at that time was just letting go of all the labels that people would put on it. Because when you're going through a crisis, it's scary, it's fearful, it's hard, it's sad. And the people around you can often put labels on you. And I always like to say the past is just a chapter, not the whole book. And that's why we're all here today. We're all here to say, we're not here to make you sad and make you think, oh my gosh, that's awful. Look how far we've come. For me, it was something I called OMG, outside and thinking, mindfulness and gratitude. Whenever a crisis happens, we always say, oh my gosh, oh my goodness, oh my God. It's our body's way of saying what's next, because fear and anxiety is depression is sadness about the past and what was, and anxiety is fear about the unknown and what's about to come. So basically, I the way I coped was really the first step was acceptance, and it sounds really simple, but just accepting what 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 is happening to me now or what was happening to me at the time rather than what was before. That is huge. It means for me it wasn't being happy that I was going through all of these awful traumatic things, my most terrible year, and not being able to speak properly with speech aphasia, not being able to find my words, not being able to, have the relationship that I used to with my partner. It was the acceptance of, hey, this is pretty crummy, but you know what? I know with a lot of skills that I have and a support system around me, I can move forward. And I don't know if you've ever read Michael Singer, but outside and thinking is really looking at the situation as an observer rather than as a participant. It doesn't mean that you're not sad and things don't hurt, but it takes the emotional sting out. It helps you keep out of the weeds of overthinking and take that one day at a time approach. Mindfulness is the M in OMG, which, as you said about your meditation and your one day at a time, and taking time for yourself every day, taking time to be present. And gratitude is the G, taking time to be grateful. And I don't mean that in a Pollyanna way because there's times where you're not grateful, but there's also, I'm speaking to you at 4 o'clock in the morning in Canada. I'm grateful I got up this morning.
Me
I'm
too.
grateful I got up and I didn't sleep through my alarm. I'm grateful that I had the presence of mind, that I was in the presence to say, hey, I'm going on with my CoGlo colleagues and talking to the World Health Summit today about mental health. And I'm very grateful for that. So I've come a long way. I'm a survivor. I talk about the power of change, embracing change rather than fearing it, and looking at each day as a gift. And that's what got me through in a nutshell. So
That's
that's me. That's
beautiful.
me.
OMG, we can't forget that in a hurry, can we? Thank you very much, Jane. That's brilliant. Gina, what
Oh,
about you?
you're welcome. I'm a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Gina.
We've all had trials and tribulations, and you don't live decades without experiencing those. But I
Mm.
had a serious ski accident in 1983. I had two failed back surgeries, and I've learnt to walk twice as an adult. Bereavement, my brother suddenly died. That's life. And I think how you deal with it is very much your choice. And one of the principles of the work that I do is that everything we do is a choice, even not choosing is a choice. And when we don't choose actively, often that's when we have the most far reaching impact in our life. And I think for me, it was making a deliberate choice that despite the fact that I was wheelchair bound, I wanted to look at what I could do rather than what I couldn't do. And it's so easy to focus on all of the things that are going wrong, particularly when they come, one after the other after the other. But I think if you focus on even the little things that are going right, the fact that the kettle boiled and you can have a great cup of tea, or somebody phones you, they may seem inconsequential. But when you gather those up and you add the gratitude for those small things, you're in the moment. You're not worrying about the past and you're not anxious about the future. You are actually engaging in the now. And I think that's really helpful. There are so many strategies that can help. Be mindful of your language, because we tend to make our low mood, our grief, our depression, our identity. You are struggling with your mental health, but that's not all of who you are. And recognize that it's the meaning we make of that, the story we make up about that, that becomes our reality. And if your reality is, I am depressed and I can't do anything and I'm not enough, that's your reality. The actual reality is that we are all enough. And so just some very, very quick things to help. One, the mountain molehill test. Does this feel like a mountain today? Will it feel like a mountain tomorrow or next week or the end of the year? If you're going to downgrade it at some point in the future, why not choose to downgrade it now? Help other people, not to the point of detriment to yourself, but when you focus on being of service, whether that's to people or animals or the environment, that takes the pressure off you. And in doing so, you get a sense of satisfaction. And in my experience, even on those really dark days, and there have been many, it's what can I do to be of service that have lifted me out of that. Look for opportunities to get into nature, to take exercise, and to laugh. All of those three things release endorphins and all of the feel-good hormones. And that can actually help you when you do it on a regular basis. And lastly, remember that nothing lasts forever. That however dismal a day it has been, the sun is shining behind the clouds and tomorrow is a new day. And please don't beat yourself up.
Oh, wise words, Gina. Thank you. The sun will come out tomorrow. They wrote a song about that, and there was a good reason for it. Yeah, it's so true. Thank you very much. Stanley, what about you? What's your experience?
Well, I want to say that number one, I'm privileged to be here, and I was honored to speak on the summit. And I understand that there's a lot of things that go in our minds, and a lot of times we'll find ourselves feeling that we're at blame for the circumstances. We carry this bondage that maybe we did something that deserved, that we earned the penalty or the punishment or the pain that we're experiencing. And in my own particular life, the experience that I had was I was married and we had a full-term pregnancy. We were expecting in 8 days, and on 10 days before the delivery of this new baby, my mom calls and said she had cancer. Immediately, my wife buckles over and thought she just went into shock because of the news, because they were very close. And the doctors told my mom that she had to have surgery, that otherwise she wouldn't live to see the baby. So there was a gamut of experiences going on. And so, being a controller, because I learned to take charge of situations, this was something that I couldn't. So I had to ruminate these thoughts and these experiences and emotions in my mind, and I didn't know how to process it. 10 days later, our baby was born, but he was stillborn. And when my mom was told that she had cancer, now you start going through all these thoughts. Why does this happen? And so, long story short, we got pregnant again, and 3 months later, she had a miscarriage. And it was the question, what did I do to deserve this? And these are the thoughts that we can't express outwardly. We can't talk to other people because there were some nice people that said, hey, you're young, you can have another baby. Well, I want to say that that's not a good thing to say. And the idea that God needs an angel in heaven, that's another not nice thing to say because it's nowhere in the Bible that it said that. So when I start to process these things in my mind, um, you start to dig deep and you start to find. And I began to find truths that set me free. And that's why the Bible says, when you know the truth, the truth will set you free. Now, I'm not here to talk about religion because it's not a religious book. What I am here to talk about is the mental experience that went on in my mind and that I was not alone. I kept listening for that still small voice. And what helped me to understand, it may not help you, but what helped me to understand was that I came across a passage in the Bible that Jesus is walking with his disciples and he says, they say, why was this man born blind? Was it from his sins or his parents' sins? And the reason that we do this in our own mind is because we're looking for us to blame for an outcome that we didn't control, that we didn't experience. And this can be, I want to say, as bad as a traumatic brain injury because it's an internal brain injury. It's an emotional brain injury. The chemicals that are released create this defective feeling, but you're not defective and you're not broken. It's an experience of life. And by having that understanding, having that draw to it. So you're probably wondering what the answer to that question was. And Jesus answered them and he said it was for neither. It was so the work of God would be displayed in his life. Now that's when heaven opened up for me, and that's what's on the headstone of my son. So the work of God would be displayed in his life. And because of that, I've been able to help other people go through those ruminating thoughts that cancer is not the end, that a death of a baby or a child is not the end. It could be the very beginning. And it began the beginning for me, and it began planting new seeds into soil that would grow up 30, 60, 100 fold. And like I said, this is not about religion. This is about what my thoughts were. This is about my relationship, not only with my God, but with my family, with my friends, with those that I would now deal with. And ultimately, it was my relationship with me and how I thought through that. And that's the idea of it. And when my mom finally did die of cancer, I was sitting at the bottom of her bed and she sat up. Now, her bones were broken, her bones were eaten. She had cancer all over. She'd been laying flat for 2 weeks. She sat straight up and looked me right in the eye. And I knew then that she was saying, free yourself from the guilt, the shame, and what you couldn't do, and go and help somebody else do process that same thing. And so that's what I want to share in this mental health. It is about your spirit, it's about your emotions, it's about the chemicals that you release. And if you can't do it on your own, which I'm going to say you can't, find somebody that can speak with you, into you, and also hear what you're saying. And they're out there. There's a panel that was on this last week, and amazing people. So they're all around you. We just have to have the opportunity to open our eyes to see them. And that's what I'd like to share with you.
Mm. Yeah, it's very true, Stanley. It's if you can't help yourself, you need to ask for help, and that's sometimes the hardest thing, isn't it? It's just having somebody that's prepared to listen and sit with you. Simon Sinek would say, "You sit in the mud with you when somebody's down, so long as you're not pulling them down with you." But somebody just to be there, just to hold you and be there through that time and listen to what you're going through. Thank you. Oof, Mitali, some brilliant ideas coming out here. It's just, yeah, so many good thoughts around how we've all dealt with it in our own sweet way. But isn't it funny that we've dealt with it in an isolated way, and now now we can share it and hopefully let people not go through the same kind of stuff that we went through. What's your experience?
Well, it was interesting what you said earlier, Jill. Getting onto the brink and how we brought ourselves back from it. I didn't bring myself back from the brink. I went straight into the brink and went right down to the bottom. So I ended up, because of experiences that I had growing up. I grew up in a I want to say predominantly white area. It wasn't predominantly white. It was white. It was me and my family, and there was nobody of color for over 10-mile radius. So obviously was, we were picked on and bullied at school. This is going back to the 80s when that sort of thing still happens now, but it's not really expected. Kids are now growing up in multicultural societies and communities. That wasn't the case when I was growing up. But what really kind of broke me was I didn't find solace in my own community. I always say that in my life I've experienced more colorism than I have racism. And what's really hurt me the most and cut through my soul was Indian people looking at me and saying that I didn't fit in, that I was too dark skinned. One of my earliest memories is somebody coming up to my father. I think I may have been 6 or 7. I'm not entirely sure. But I do have one of these memories that's definitely there, which is someone saying, oh, well, make sure you educate her, because if she's educated, later on, I managed to understand. Obviously, as a 6-year-old, I didn't fully understand what they were talking about. Looking back on it, I think what that conversation was all about is that if she's educated, the fact that she's not very attractive would be overlooked, because you'd be able to get a guy from India to come over for the passport, which is what I now gather it. I mean, to grow up, even though I was only 6 or 7 at the time and I didn't fully understand it, a child is not stupid. They're very aware when something is wrong, and what Stanley talked about, you internalize it and you think that's something I've done something wrong. So I grew up with that. So when I was unleashed into the world, went to university, of course I was going to go crazy, and I did go absolutely crazy. I ended up having an amphetamine addiction. I lost my place at university. Ended up in homeless. I actually slept on the streets for about a week and a half. Thankfully, at that time, the government had more funding than there is now, which it terrifies me what's happening now. And as a female anyway, within a week or so, I was spotted and then put into a shelter for my own safety. So I wasn't on the streets. If I was male, Lord knows how long I would have spent on the street. So strangely, being a woman actually helped me in this arena. So I ended up in homeless shelters for about 2 years. So yeah, I didn't pull myself from the brink. I went straight into the brink, unfortunately. But that really affected, I mean, my mental health was already unstable. Add street drugs on top of that. That isn't going to help. But now I realized what I was doing, I had no idea at the time, was I was self-medicating. That's essentially what, anybody who takes drugs or even alcohol, or, the self-medicating, they don't realize they're doing. They say they're doing it for fun and they're doing it to be sociable or doing it to relax, or all these reasons that we give to other people why we're doing various drugs, but legal or illegal. But the reality is we're self-medicating ourselves from life, which is the sad thing. We're self-medicating ourselves from life. So I think my take on my experiences and how I was able to come out from that, it did take me 10 years where I would get clean, then I'd relapse, then I'd get clean, then I'd relapse. And it was only really when my dad died when I was 29 years old that was the big wake-up call. I realized that because of my addiction, I didn't spend much time with my dad in his last decade of his life. And that's time I'm never, ever going to get back. So that was the wake-up call. It was like, I need to be there for my mother. I can't keep relapsing and just destroying my life and rebuilding it again. But I think, I've been in therapy and I still have a therapist, by the way. Wonderful people. Get yourself a therapist and never let them go if you find a good one. Even that's the other, I would say the big thing I would say is people kind of think of therapy as something goes wrong, then they go and get a therapist to fix that thing that goes wrong. That's exactly what I did. But then what I realized is that you still should see a therapist for the rest of your life, because why would you want to get broken again to go and see a therapist? Wouldn't it? You don't go to the gym after you get fit and then you stay fit by going to the gym. You don't just go, I'm fit now, I won't go to the gym anymore. So it's the same thing. So best advice I would say is, if you find a great therapist who helps you, carry on seeing them even once you're fixed, because you're never truly fixed anyway. But the main thing I learned from therapy, and something that Harold talks about, I think that's why I clicked with Harold when we met, is yes, there's a lot of accountability. You do have to, I think Gina said, how you deal with a problem is about you. But also what I would say to further what Gina says is understanding what is you and what isn't your problem. One thing I learned is that there's too much stock now placed on the individual becoming resilient to everything. We shouldn't be resilient to everything. I don't want, for example, my skin to be resilient to fire, because it just means if I'm near a fire, I'm just going to burn dead. I need my skin to be sensitive to fire. So it says, hey, get out of this. You shouldn't be here. You don't want to die. It's the same thing. And Harold talks about this so eloquently, that suicide is seen as something, well, that person was either weak or too traumatized, or, yeah, all of those things. But also, as a society, why have we created a world where people are committing suicide? We need to look at ourselves and not just make it about the person who committed suicide. Actually, Harold told me not to even use the word committed anymore. So died by suicide, because they didn't do anything. It's a result of what we've all done. So yeah, the biggest thing I've learned is to actually not be so resilient, be resilient to a point. But there are things that have happened to you that are not your fault, and really you should be angry. And that probably informs me with what I do now, helping my authors write books. They're usually quite angry about things that have happened to them. And they're saying, actually, things need to change in the world around us. It's not just for the individual to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think things like this summit are moving us in the right direction, because the more we can talk about these things, the more people can connect up and realize that they're not on their own. They're not, that there are other people out there that have been through what they've been through, or understand what they've been through, or want to help them come out the other end. So the more we can talk about it, the better it is. I totally agree with what you're saying there, Mitali. Thank you. Phil, last but not least, what's your story?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for being upon this brilliance here of these people. So try to condense this. It started around 1999, 2000. I was falsely accused of, through the chiropractic and medical board, three things were going to happen to me. Number one, I was going to lose my license. Two, I was going to jail for insurance fraud. And three, I was going to have to pay back 3 times of what they gave me. And as I said, it was false. Went through a few years of that, but everything was fine. It was just a false accusation. But during that process of the stress, I started to really break down my body. And then my father, 71 years old, healthy, developed brain cancer. 7 months later, he passed away. And then I had developed a disability that caused me to close my practice. It was a 15-year-old practice. I closed it. Fine. Now what do I do? And then I became the primary caretaker of my mother for 7 years until she passed. She was always ailing during that time. Um, as that time went through, I was going through financial ruin, trying to figure out what to do. Went through a horrific divorce. One of my daughters almost tried to commit suicide. They said that if my ex came home 10 minutes earlier, she would have been dead. And there's a lot more I can go through that. But during that process, I realized that it was for a reason. I didn't know what the reason was. And this was going on over the last like 10 years, one thing after another, and then other things as well. But it forced me to discover what I discovered. And one of the things I tell people is that the more you go through, the more of an impact you can make. And one of the things I discovered was a inborn sabotaging trait. That was reason why a lot of this was coming to me, is because I needed to evolve in such a way. And during the process, one of the things I used to say 1,000 times a day was, I wonder what gift I'm getting. I wonder what gift I'm getting. I wonder what gift I'm getting. And then I realized that it wasn't coming. It was already in me. And through these experiences, it was breaking down the wall to get to what I had to offer to impact the world. And yes, a lot of times it was like, why me? And then immediately I say, why not you? So one of the things that really allowed me to do was knowing that the universe or God or higher power, whatever you want to call that for you, it doesn't speak your language. It speaks through experience. And when you can see that whatever's coming my way, whatever in my world at that moment in time, what is it trying to tell me? And there's three things that it will always do for you. Number one, it's a benefit, it's a detriment, or it just is. I choose to see what is the benefit out of this at this moment. And even though I can't find it, I do my best to stay in the moment of feeling better, knowing that this is going through a situation. But sometimes you just can't get through it and you need help. And all the techniques that everybody talked about here is very, very important for you, especially having some type of support. And some people just don't have that support. So they're out there. You just got to be open to it. Sometimes you don't trust people, so you push people away. But one of the things I would express is that is having the gratitude of, even though I don't know what I'm going through, that there is no force out there that's trying to punish me, like Stanley said. It's here for to evolve. And what I discovered through self-sabotage is that it's just when you don't do what you're supposed to do or whatever that, and I don't like to say I have to do this. I say you get to do this, right? And what is this particular moment in time? What will make possible for me going through this? What could I help to impact other people? So at that moment, you're just in protection. That's it. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not an idiot or a loser. You're just protecting yourself at that moment in time. And that's why you're not moving through that situation. But if you can really figure out, why am I protecting myself? There's nothing wrong with me. And how can I benefit this? And from doing so, the answer will come if you're open to it. So those are the things. And of course, the big G word is gratitude, is doing your best to say, thank you for this. I have no idea why I'm going through this, but I'm going to have enough trust that this is for my evolution. Because there's only two things you do: you dissolve or you evolve. That's it. They happen at the same time, right? I cannot move forward without detaching from something where I'm at, right? And I cannot evolve without that dissolution. So dissolving and evolving happen at the same time. It's up to you. Which side of the coin do you want to focus on most of the time? And if you want to look at something negative and you want to feel sorry for yourself, that's okay. You're just in protection, right? If you go in the corner and you suck your thumb and take the pillow and go in a fetal position and cry, I'm good with that. That's just protection. The question is how long will you be there for? And that's the key. It's okay to go through negativity and feeling lousy and all that, but it's how long are you going to be there for? How can you find a way that this is a way to not only impact my life, but also others? And how can I move forward with that? So that's some of the things I would suggest for people to look at.
Thank you, Phil. I mean, you've kind of encapsulated a lot of what everybody's stories are about. What is your gift? I think if you look at all the stories that people are talking about here, we find that, sorry, I was just checking something. We find that everyone has taken these horrific experiences that we've been through and have created something that's special that we can share with others and support others. I think for me, a question maybe back to you is when you've got your pillow in your corner and you're sucking your thumb and everything's like, and everything's shut down. For me, it was, I could hear my nan talking. My nan, who was very good, said her prayers every night, gave blessings to everybody every night. She always used to say, bearing in mind, she died at 96, back in 1976. So she'd lived through 2 world wars, Queen Victoria on the throne, different lifetime, different generation, been through the Blitz, etc., etc. But she always used to say to us, look you in the eyes and say, look, life might be tough and there might be clouds over you at the moment, but there is always a silver lining in those clouds. Sometimes it's hard to see it, but it's there and you've got to find it. So when I'm sitting there going, stop the world, I want to get off, it's all too much. I can't cope with that. I hear her voice in the back of my head. I'm like, well, what's the silver lining? What's the silver lining? And you could eventually, you can open your eyes a little bit and see that, well, evolve, dissolve and evolve. I mean, that's a beautiful phrase. I want to put that on a t-shirt. It's that kind of, it's the beginning of you taking the tiniest step forward to just going, well, where is this going to take me? What could this lead to? Why am I experiencing this? Not because it's my fault, which is the whole title of this whole summit. It's not your fault, but because there is a purpose behind it that you can create that will make it better for somebody else. I don't know, any of you guys listening to these stories, have you got any sort of feedback that you want to share around what other people have been through? Jane.
Yes, hi. I thank you so much, Phil, for emphasizing the gift because, trauma and drama in your life, you're right. I mean, death and grief, it's very, very challenging at the time to say. And as I said in my book, Fireside Up, I said I felt like I was going to the principal's office, but I didn't know what I was going there for. And once I accepted that, no, I wasn't going to the principal's office all the time, it was that meaning. And sometimes we have to come out the other end of it to look for the gift and the meaning of it. So I'm really happy that you and Gill that you said that, because I just want to emphasize, and I think Stanley, you tried to do that too. When you go through these difficult things in life, it's not just you that's affected, it's also people around you. And so you're not actually alone. You're going through it. You may think that there's nobody else going through this, but they are. And they're going through it with you in it, but all in different ways. And it's how you respond rather than react to what's happening around you. So I think what we've all tried to do as individuals, and now as a collective, is we've all tried to look at our experiences and say, and find meaning. And that often happens when people go through difficult situations in their life. And it's like a fork in the road. It's like you're either going to go this way and you're going to get stuck. And it's easy to get stuck. And that's what we're all talking about, how to get unstuck and move forward. But there's also then, okay, how do I move forward and clear my path? So thank you for dissolve and evolve. I'm going to borrow that. And I'm going to say, Dr. Phil taught me about dissolving and evolving. So anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really gained a lot from everything that people have said. So that's the gift of being here today. Thanks, Gill, for bringing us all together.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Jane. Gina, what were your thoughts?
Inevitably, everybody's got a story, and it doesn't matter who you talk to, wherever you go in the world, everybody is experiencing life. And one person's trauma is another person's, that's an ordinary day.
Yeah.
And I think that we so often, the news this morning is people facing another hurricane. It's 2 weeks since the last one, and you can only imagine what they're going through. And I think one of the problems that we have is that we tend to create almost a grading. This is my trauma, and my trauma is bigger than your trauma, and it's more important than your trauma. And the reality is, it doesn't matter what other people are going through. If you're finding it a challenge, then it's your challenge. But ultimately, it's your decision whether, as Phil says, you stay in the corner with your thumb in your mouth and you in the fetal position for a few minutes, a few days, a few years. So how do you then choose when you're feeling desperate? How do you choose? How do you move yourself when everything feels so monumental? And I think you can't eat an elephant in one sitting, or if you're Mitali, you can't eat a whole field of corn in one sitting because she's a vegan. But mouthful by mouthful, you can do it. So I think if you're going through real challenges, break the day into, how am I feeling in this moment now? Can I, in this moment now, find something that is going well? Because we tend to generalize, everything in my life is going bad. So find one thing and be grateful for that. And then think, well, okay, what can I do in the next 5 minutes that will lift my mood? Whether that's watching something on YouTube or TikTok that will make you laugh, or phoning a friend. And I do think that the looking outwards rather than looking in at yourself when everything feels desperate is a really good thing to do. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to do the deep dive work, but you need to be resourced to do that. And so how can you look outward and perhaps phone a friend or do a random act of kindness for someone that will actually make you feel better. And then think, well, what can I do in this day? And I think there are two other things I'd like to say. Everybody that I have worked with, I have known that's done great things in the world, everybody has been through some level of crisis or crises, and they have used that as the rocket fuel to then make a positive difference in the world. The challenge, of course, is how quickly you can move from that place of poor me, the world is happening to me, to the world is happening for me. And it's that balance between looking out in terms of helping and doing the introspective work. And the last thing is, so many people here have said, get help. If you're sitting there thinking, I can't afford it, we've all got loads of free stuff. Go and look at our websites. Go and do something, take a step, take an action, because in the doing of that, that semblance of control comes back. And even if it is as you're walking down the street, however you're feeling inside, you smile and say, hi, Phil, hi, Gill. That will help you. And you have no idea how much it can help other people too.
Oh, absolutely. I love that, Gina. I mean, one of the things I do if I'm feeling low is I get a carrier bag and I go on a little walk and I pick up all the rubbish that I see. And there's always rubbish that you see. You can't go anywhere without seeing a bit of rubbish. And then if you bump into somebody and they spot what you're doing, they are so thrilled that you're doing that. They want to chat and say, that's very kind. And you've got this interaction with this total stranger. And I just say, I'm doing my good deed for the day. I'm just picking up some rubbish. And it makes me feel good. I've done something worthwhile. So it makes me feel better. And that other person looks and goes, oh, that's a nice thing to do. It might encourage them to do the same at some point. It's a tiny little thing, but it can, when you're feeling like you're nothing, it makes you feel like you've got a purpose to get out and just pick up some rubbish somewhere. But thank you.
In response to that, Gill, when people say it's a tiny little thing, the power of tiny little things is immense. Spend the night in a room with a mosquito and know just how powerful a little thing can be. And just finally, Phil, you talk about dissolving or evolving. Think about a caterpillar. When it goes into the chrysalis, it has to dissolve and become mush before it can become a butterfly. We have to go through that metamorphosis in order to be stronger and to evolve.
And that's just nature. That's the way it is. Thanks, Gina. I'm looking at the clock. We've only a few minutes left, so I'm going to take Phil's the last one and then we'll round up. Thank you.
I just want to know how Gina got into my head and said the same things that I was going to say. So now I'm trying to pivot into something else.
She's like that.
Real quickly is that, if you're looking at nature, this is one of the things I have done, is that if you are in the northern hemisphere during winter time and you hate the winter, you don't have to freeze. You can just go down to the southern hemisphere and get warmth. So both are happening at the same time. Okay. And if you love your TV and your Netflix, then find true, real movies that people have gone through detriment and be inspired by them, knowing that they were nothing special. They were just people moving forward and certain things happened. But just knowing that you have that same ability to move forward. So that could be the inspiration that you need at that moment in time. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Phil. Yeah, definitely. Last one, Stanley, over to you.
Okay, so the last thing that I want to say is that, we talk about women having emotions, but men have he-motions. And when you understand that, and you can appreciate that, you don't have to be the tough person, and you can be male or female having that experience where you've carried the baggage, you've carried the weight, you've put the armor up for other people. But I remember reading a journal where my ex-wife really didn't think that I was going through the same stuff, but I was going through it in a different way. And just because I hid it from the world didn't mean that I didn't deal with it. And it really is by the grace of God that I did not, beat myself up continually. And It is finding and processing, and it is processing in the way that you find is best for you, because there's a panel of 6 people here, and we all are helpers. That's why we're here. But we all have our own unique style. And you have a unique style, you have a unique emotion or he-motion, and embrace it, and don't negate it for anyone, especially yourself.
Yeah.
That's the last thing that I'd like to say.
Yeah, that perfectly said. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for getting up in the middle of the night, for being here this morning, and for sharing your experiences and your inner genius, because all of these things that we have gone through have created the person that we are today, for good or for bad. But generally, we're using it and utilizing it into evolving into being better than we were previously. It takes guts to look inwards and look at yourself and go, how can I be better? And I think we've all been on part of that journey, and it's evolving and it's still carrying on. And we're not perfect, but we've just got experiences that we're sharing. So if anybody wants to connect up with these people, we will be giving you details of that later as well. So for now, thank you very much for joining me on this fireside chat for the World Mental Health Summit today. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye now.